Hi, my name's Mark Latender. I've been a VTA systems consultant with Risk for over 10 years, and today I'd like to go over creating your own online certificate templates and setting them up so students can access them anytime after they complete a course. I recently wrote a blog article on our website at risk-inc.com discusses the updates that were done to the online certificate program that we have and have had for years. There's the full list of all the new fields that you can put in there, but I really want to get down to this section here that the first link will send you just to the instructions. Those instructions will contain a link to a zip file, and that zip file you can actually get right here. That zip file, once you download it and unzip it, is going to contain a series of files that are going to help you produce your own online templates. So if we just run down background, this is simply an image that I use to create a certificate looking type of image, and I actually just created that by using PowerPoint, inserting my images the way that I want, any kind of text the way that I want, and I've got a program that I happen to use for screen capture. I can then bring it into the screen capture, crop it the way I need to, save the file so that I can now use that as a background image. Also included is a text file that includes all the fields that you could use. Now, it's not the pretty name of them, but you're going to see as we open up one of these templates, this is actually the parameter that you're going to use to identify where you want to see the field. And also in the back office application of VTA, when you're setting up the link to the certificate, you're going to see these types of values over and over. So it's going to be a handy file to kind of keep when you're setting up your links. So if we look at the first certificate here, and note that it is an HTML document, but it is using the HTML extension. And that's critical for this to work. You don't want to save it as HTML here, you're going to save it as HTML. So I just happen to use Dreamweaver for my HTML editing. You could use any tool, you could even use Notepad if you want. The critical pieces to this, what you see, let's say in an editor, when we look at the first parameter here for employee name, I can see a span ID called employee name, and I can also see the text that you actually see here. You want to be very careful if you're just going to try to edit in this view, because you could easily remove a span ID and then that value is actually not going to show up. The span ID is referring to this JavaScript here that contains, again, all the parameters. So you can see that this parameter name requires this ID to be used, and that's what we see down here. This employee name is the name of the ID, and the field that is going to get replaced is here. So this blank certificate really is just there, so if you want to start with this one, you can arrange it the way that you want it to look and just pull off the fields that you don't want to use. Just again, be careful that you don't get rid of any part of the script or don't misidentifying one of the field names. Second one here that we have is, I call it no table, and that just means that I'm making it look like a certificate, but it's not using a table. So the HTML page has a background image here, and it's set on don't repeat for the page. Some of the parameters of the full list are here. I'm not using all of them. I've just decided to use these specific ones because they meet my certificate need. But you can add or remove any one of those fields that we have available as you need. And then finally we have one I call partial. It is also not using all the fields, but it is using a table to try to help force the display of where those values are actually going to appear. So you can see that the HTML code starts looking a lot more complex than the straightforward list that we had before, but what is exactly the same is the script. All these parameters are still all declared. It's just that they're not actually used on the page. And which parameters you use on the page is going to be critical when you get to the point of setting up your lesson link. So a couple of these images really are just there as a reminder to you that if you're storing your documents, your templates in an unsecure location, when a student launches it, they're going to see run links. And if your templates happen to be stored in a secure location, then you can take advantage of the new download buttons that they look a little nicer, and they actually generate a PDF instead of just opening up another web page that they need to print it on right there, or who knows, maybe they have a PDF generator on the machine that they're on, but if they don't, they can still download the file. Next, we have the instructions, and the instructions include a lot of the information that I'm giving you here, and then there's a PDF of those instructions. The reason I include both is so that you can easily share the PDF if you want, but if you wanted to set up your own instructions from the instructions that I have, maybe something specific to your organization, this document that comes with the zip file, it does again go over every single field that you can use. It also goes over the instructions on setting up the CRT learner application. And that CRT learner application is critical because that's what tells the system to use the online certificate program to actually pull the parameters so that they can actually properly display on your certificates. So if we were just going to concentrate on this first piece, that means that in the back office application, you need to have the CRT learner application set up. And to do that, we're going to be in back office. You're going to go into learner applications. I happen to already have the CRT learner application set up, but it's very easy. You would just click add, and when you do, you would give it the file extension of CRT and give it a short description of online certificate. And you would need to do that if you're in a multi-site setup in VTA. You would need to do that in every single site. So with your CRT learner application, all you're doing is you're telling VTA, I want to use this. The program runs automatically in the background. There's nothing for you to do other than the fact that you added it to your system, and now you will be ready to add it and associate it to your lessons. The next piece is develop the certificate template, and that's kind of what we did here. Getting that certificate to look exactly the way that you want, but still retaining the script intact that identifies what are the parameters that you can use versus how did you actually, which ones did you use and how did you use them? Where is the data going to need to get placed when the student pulls up their certificate? Now it's time to actually set up where you're going to store that certificate. So you're going to need to put it on a web server and it needs to be in a location that the student can access. So you're not going to want to put it on your local drive or a SharePoint site that requires a password. This has to be something that the student can access freely on their own. So you'll post it to a web server that will create your link. I'm not going to go through the process of what that route should be. I will tell you that for my documents, this is essentially where I place them. I've got a location, I've got a folder and another folder, and this is where my HTML file is. Again, in the HTML extension. You'll put in the question mark when you're setting up your link, and then after that question mark, you're going to put in all the parameters that you used on that certificate in the order that you put them on the certificate. So what that means is, if I look at that lesson, and we're looking at the one with no table, I used all of these parameters in this order. These parameters here, you can see this list matches this here, and that helps me create the link, the full link that I'm going to need to associate as the command link for this certificate. If I go back into VTA, this is the course that I want to associate my certificate with. I'm going to edit that course and navigate over to the Lessons tab. Now this course already has my lesson set up, so I'm just going to go ahead and edit it so you can see it. You would just click on Add. So without the table, here's that link. And I happen to paste the link here so we could easily look at that. But one thing for sure is you need to make sure that the lesson is not required. It is going to be a document link. And when you select the document lesson type, you're going to see a command link become available. And this is where you're going to set the application, that CRT application that you added. You'll just select it from the list of available learner applications, and you can leave completion action set to no action. That's fine. If you wanted to, you could set it with a credit button, and then the student would be able to credit themselves on the day that they launch that certificate. But when we look at the actual command link and what should it be, and again I copied it from here and I pasted it here, and so we could see it a little bit larger. Let's look at it here. This first parameter I have needs to be the first parameter after the ampersand in the link. So using that initial list that came with the zip file, the cert fields, you can just grab, first I want to display this. and slowly build that link. So you would come back and you would say, well, I'm going to use in this location, this is the file that I'm using right here, and then I want to include the student name, and I happen to also want to put in their first name, their last name, all those fields that we saw. You're just going to keep on adding until you get down to that final parameter, and that's what you'll see here. So you could use the templates with all the parameters set, remove the ones that you don't need. You just have to make sure that when you're setting to use that template, that you only include the parameters that you used on the template and put them in the order that they appear on the template. Then you would click OK to save your record. And again, you know, something needs to happen. They are required to do certain lessons in the course, and then the certificates would not be required. And the reason they're not required is because if it's a required lesson, then that means it's a step in the process, and they wouldn't be considered done with the course until they launch that lesson. So in order to get get the student a completion date, it needs to be not required. So we've looked at the fields of what's available in the CRT application. We've set up the CRT learner application in the back office piece. We can develop a certificate template using the files that are available in the zip file. You post it to a web server, then you add that certificate lesson, and the instructions will include just the step-by-steps of everything I discussed a minute ago. So now we can go check it out in action. So if I'm a student and I'm going to take your course, I need to find your course. I'm going to search for this new course, launch it from the search. It's going to present the lessons. It lets me know I need to credit myself here. This might be some PDF or some online module that you have them review. I'm going to go ahead and hit credit. Now that was the only thing that I needed to do. It was the only required lesson. And as soon as I finished that, my download options became available. And that's because I did store the certificates in a secure location. So when I click download, and I happen to be in Chrome, it goes and it pulls the file template, it PDFs it, and makes it available for me. So now I can see this is the blank template first. It's bringing back all the information that I needed for my certificate. Now, anytime just noticing the classroom here is to be assigned, and that's because it's an online course, so you wouldn't have an actual classroom location. That template without a table. All right, so this is one course. I happen to be pulling 3 different types of certificates, and you can do that too. Note that you probably are going to have to play with the look of the whole PDF as you make your way through your first one. And now here's a third version of a certificate, different template, same course, so you can see how you can quickly create a variety of views to present to your students to give them online certificates.